Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're really digging into some core physics, specifically Chapter 49 of the Feynman lectures. It's all about modes. And if you're doing physics at college level, well, you know this chapter is key. It connects classical mechanics to, well, pretty much everything else.
That's right. And Feynman, he really emphasizes this. He suggests the ideas here, when generalized, might just be the most far-reaching principle in mathematical physics.
Wow.
So yeah, we're not just talking about, vibrating strings. We're setting up the basic idea that lets us understand the hidden patterns in any complex motion in any system.
Okay, so our mission today, let's lay it out. We're going step by step through Feynman's approach here. We want to get how these boundary conditions, these physical limits, basically force a system into very specific ways of moving what we call modes.
Exactly. And we'll start simple, just like Feynman does. One dimension, a wave. And see what happens when you just put one boundary on it.
Okay, let's unpack this, starting with the fundamental example, reflection. So imagine a wave traveling down a string, just one dimension for now. Mathematically, we describe the shape, the displacement away, as a mix of two functions, right? One going right, phi x et, and one going left, gx plus et.
Yep, superposition. Now, let's put in a constraint. Let's fix one end of the string, say at $6. Imagine it's attached to an infinitely solid wall, as Feynman puts it.
Okay, so it can't move there.
Right. The condition is simple. At $6, the displacement arm must be 0, always, for all time.
The single rule, it must immediately mess with the wave that hits it.
It does, profoundly. The math tells us exactly what has to happen. To keep thy dollars at the boundary, the reflected wave, g-euro, has to be directly related to the incoming wave, phi so.
Yeah.
It turns out g-euro at some time, d-euro must be equal to minus $5 at time minus t-dollar.
Okay, wait, so the reflected wave is inverted,
That's
flipped upside down.
Exactly. Inverted and traveling back the way it came. It's the only way the incoming and outgoing waves can perfectly cancel each other out right at that fixed point, $6.
That's really neat. The physics constraint forces the mathematical form.
Precisely.
And here's where it gets really interesting, visually at least. If you send a continuous sine wave down the string, it hits the wall, reflects inverted.
And then it starts overlapping, superimposing on the incoming wave.
And the result isn't a traveling wave anymore, is it?
No. You get what's called a standing wave. The whole thing just oscillates up and down, but it doesn't go anywhere.
And within that standing wave, there are points that literally don't move at all.
Correct. Those points of zero displacement, always zero, those are the nodes.
Okay, nodes. And you mentioned modes earlier. Let's define that clearly.
A mode is a specific pattern of motion where the entire system, the whole string in this case, oscillates sinusoidally. Every part of it moves up and down together at one single characteristic frequency.
Got it. So one fixed end gives us inversion, standing waves, nodes. But for something like a guitar string, we need stability, right? We fix both ends.
Exactly. Now let's confine it. Clamp the string at 6 allelers and at 6 dines. Two fixed ends.
So now we have two boundary conditions. $1 at both ends.
And this is where things get really restrictive. The system becomes incredibly picky about which waves can even exist.
Picky how? Like, it just filters out most possibilities.
That's a good way to put it. You've essentially built a mechanical frequency filter. Only very specific sine waves can satisfy the zero displacement condition at both $6 and $6 simultaneously.
Which ones? What's the condition?
The waves have to fit perfectly within the length dollars. Mathematically, this means that $1 must contain an exact integer number of half wavelengths.
Ah, okay. So you can fit half a wave, one full wave, 1.5 waves, and so on.
Precisely. This puts a condition on the wave number. It turns out color dollar times must equal 9 times pi, where nuller is an integer. 1, 2, 3.
So just by clamping the ends, the possible wave shapes, the allowed wavelengths, become quantized, discrete.
Yes. And since the frequency omega is related to the wave number kc, specifically omega equals kc do, where Sormuller's is the wave speed, this restriction on Thalers means the system can only vibrate at specific allowed frequencies. These are its natural frequencies.
Okay, let's visualize those. What does one tall one look like?
$1 is the simplest mode. It's just half a sine wave fitting in the length $. That's the lowest possible frequency, the fundamental frequency.
And N2, $2?
And 2 and 2, no, that's the second mode or the first overtone. You have a full sine wave in the length. There's a node right in the middle now, as well as at the ends. And the frequency is exactly twice the fundamental.
So for the 1D string, the allowed frequencies are simple integer multiples, omega $2, omega 3, omega, and so on. A perfect harmonic series.
Exactly, and this is crucial. Feynman emphasizes that any possible motion of that string, no matter how complicated it looks initially, like if you pluck it weirdly, can always be described as just adding up these pure, simple sinusoidal modes, each with its own amplitude.
The modes are like the building blocks of the motion.
Perfect analogy. They are the fundamental building blocks.
Okay, that makes sense for 1D. But things usually get messier in higher dimensions. What happens if we go to 2D, say a rectangular drumhead?
Right, good transition. Imagine a rectangular membrane, length the doll, with begallers. And it's fixed, clamped down all the way around its perimeter.
Okay, so the boundary condition is now $1 along all four edges. That sounds much harder.
It is more complex. The displacement dollar now depends on both 6 ballers, any coordinates, and time, of course.
Yeah.
To satisfy the boundary conditions on all sides, you find that you need 2 integer indices to specify a mode. Feynman calls them nuller and nuller.
So like one index for the x direction fit and one for the y direction fit?
Sort of, yeah. Null relates to how many half wavelengths fit along the length of the dollar, and nuller relates to how many fit along the width of the dollar. So each mode is defined by a pair around-there.
Okay, so we have these 2D modes. Now the big question, what about the frequencies? In 1D, we got that nice known omega dollar harmonic series. Does that still hold? Are the frequencies for the drumhead simple multiples of the lowest one?
Here's the catch. Generally, no.
Really? Why not?
Well, the formula for the frequency, or rather frequency squared, omega 2 involves both nuller and nuller. It's proportional to something like m2a to 2 plus m2b2.
I see. Because you're adding terms related to nuller and nullers, you don't just get simple multiples anymore.
Exactly. Unless the rectangle has very special dimensions, the natural frequencies of the 2D membrane are usually not integer multiples of the fundamental unavoidable frequency. They're inharmonic.
That explains why if you just bang on a drumhead randomly, you don't usually hear a clear musical pitch. You get more of a complex, clangy sound.
Precisely. It's the sound of many different non-harmonically related modes all vibrating at once. The geometry really matters. A simple string gives harmonics. A 2D rectangle generally doesn't.
Okay, so we've seen modes in continuous systems, 1D and 2D. Feynman then shifts gears a bit, right, to make sure we see this isn't just about waves.
Yes, he wants to show the universality. So he looks at a discrete system, something really simple mechanically. 2 identical pendulums, and they're connected by a weak spring, so they can influence each other. This system only has 2 things that can move independently, the 2 pendulum bobs. We say it has 2 degrees of freedom.
So instead of wave equations, we're now dealing with, what, Newton's laws for each pendulum? Coupled equations?
Exactly. You write down the equations of motion for each pendulum, including the force from the spring, which depends on the difference in their positions. You get a set of coupled differential equations.
And when you solve those, what do you find?
You find something remarkably simple. There are only 2 specific frequencies at which this system likes to oscillate naturally.
Only 2, because there are 2 degrees of freedom.
Precisely. The number of modes always equals the number of degrees of freedom in these linear systems. So the simple system has just 2 modes of vibration.
Can we picture them? What do these 2 modes look like physically?
Yeah, they're quite intuitive. The first mode has the lower frequency. In this mode, both pendulums swing back and forth perfectly together. Same amplitude, same direction, completely in phase.
Like synchronized swimmers.
Kinda, yeah. And crucially, because they're always moving together, the spring connecting them never gets stretched or compressed. It stays relaxed.
So the spring isn't even really doing anything in that mode.
Effectively, no. And that's why the frequency of this mode turns out to be exactly the same as the natural frequency of a single pendulum. The coupling doesn't affect this symmetric motion.
Okay, that's mode 1. What about mode 2? It must involve the spring more.
It does. Mode 2 has a higher frequency. In this mode, the 2 pendulums swing in exactly opposite directions. Same amplitude, but perfectly out of phase. When one swings left, the other swings right.
Antisymmetric motion.
Right. And now, the spring is constantly being stretched and compressed to its maximum extent. It's working hard.
And that extra restoring force from the spring that bumps up the frequency.
Exactly. The system becomes stiffer, effectively, so it oscillates faster. The frequency squared for this mode is higher. The meganetu plus 2 kilomotors, where that Kalmaller term comes from the spring.
That's a fantastic example. It really shows modes aren't just math. They're distinct physical ways a system can move.
That's the core idea. Whether it's a continuous string, a membrane, or just 2 pendulums, the system has these inherent characteristic patterns of motion.
So tying it all together, Feynman brings this under the general concept of a linear system. What's the big principle he's driving at?
The universal principle is this. For any linear vibrating system, no matter how complex, its general motion can always be described as a sum, a superposition, of its special characteristic motions, the normal modes.
Okay.
And each of these normal modes is a pure sinusoidal oscillation at a single specific frequency, one of the system's natural frequencies, determined only by the physics of the system itself, its mass, its springs, its boundaries.
Right. And this is where Feynman drops the bombshell, connecting it way beyond classical physics. He says this idea is, well, it's fundamental to quantum mechanics, too.
Yes. This is the really profound connection he makes at the end. Think about quantum mechanics. The energy of a particle, like an electron in an atom, is related to the frequency of something called its probability amplitude function, which behaves mathematically like a wave.
Okay. So energy and frequency are linked, like Planck and Einstein said.
Right. Now, think back to our string fixed at both ends. The boundaries forced it to only vibrate at specific, definite frequencies, the modes, on the LCL.
Yeah, the natural frequencies.
Now apply that exact same logic to the quantum world. An electron isn't free, it's trapped, confined by the electric potential of the nucleus. That potential acts like a boundary condition for its wave function.
So the confinement forces the electron's wave function into specific modes, just like the string.
Precisely. The wave function can only exist in patterns that fit the potential well. And since frequency is linked to energy,
this means the electron can only have specific, definite energies, the allowed energy levels.
exactly. The quantization of energy levels in atoms, which is like the cornerstone of quantum theory, arises from the exact same mathematical principle as the quantization of frequencies on a violin string. It's all about boundary conditions forcing systems into specific modes.
Wow. Okay, that really is a far-reaching principle. The physics of a vibrating string scales all the way down to explain quantum energy levels.
It's the underlying wave mechanics. Boundary conditions impose restrictions, leading to discrete modes with characteristic frequencies, classical, or energies, quantum,
So let's recap the journey. We went from just seeing how a wave flips when it hits a wall,
to seeing how fixing both ends of a string selects only specific frequencies, quantizing the motion into harmonic modes.
then we saw how in 2D, like a drumhead, the geometry gets complicated and you generally lose those simple harmonic relationships.
We looked at a simple, discrete system, the coupled pendulums, showing it also has distinct modes determined by its structure.
And finally, the big reveal. This concept of systems having inherent modes with fixed frequencies is the classical analogy, the very reason why energy is quantized in quantum mechanics.
That's the essence of it. Boundary conditions aren't just incidental details. They are the mathematical heart of why systems exhibit characteristic behaviors. They force the system to reveal its fundamental patterns, its modes, each with a definite frequency or energy.
Okay, a final thought then, something for you, the listener, to ponder. We talked about modes being superposed. Think about a bell that's a complex 3D vibrating object, right? It has lots of modes, many of them non-harmonic, giving it that rich sound. If you strike a bell in just one spot, you excite many of its modes at once. But the way you strike it and where you strike it probably doesn't excite all modes equally. So what could the complex decaying sound of that bell tell you about which specific modes got the biggest kick initially?
Something to think about.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into Feynman's take on modes.
Thanks for listening.